The test itself has not changed any. That there have been a lot of suggestions from you and others, and also the excitement of MolDX approval that has generated an interest in updating the report form. So next slide. What the three things we're going to just go over very quickly is it's a redesigned patient report. It actually is something that reflects a new logo, as you see there in green, the 4 different tests that they have available. And it is sort of a difficult, I'll show it to you in a second, sort of a more modern than the contemporary older ones we have. The low risk report enhancements, again, nothing has changed. The genes, the clinical model, and the assay are all the same. There's some, so since the original trials, the company has been gathering a lot of data on patients and adding variables that might be able to help you fine tune it a little bit more. So what's added to the report, and I'll show you this in a minute for the low risk, is sort of a personalized positive predictive value for your Gleason score 6, grade group 1 or grade group 2 and above. There's a revised disclaimer that the first pre-biopsy, this is the first pre-biopsy biomarker to successfully complete MolDX review. So mdxhealth went through a rigorous 3-year evaluation and data, and so this is the first biomarker to get this validation and from MolDX, which has some impact, and I'll show you that in a minute. Next slide. So the characteristics of SelectMDx, which we all know and love, and I do, is that several things, including the negative predictive value. As you well know, when you talk to patients who are worried in the PSA 6 or something like that, and you get this back, and you can tell them if it's a negative predictive value of 99% that they don't have badness, really a significant cancer, Gleason 8, or 95% 7 and above. The other thing that's out there is that, and this is no small feat either, those of you that are in NCCN institutions, they have NCCN guideline approval. It's in the guidelines, not approval, but it's in the guidelines. We're all familiar with the turnaround. The new thing is Medicare coverage should be 0 out-of-pocket expense. And even with, as you well know, a lot of private insurance companies follow Medicare. We'll see what happens in the long run. But the vast majority of private insurance, the most the patient's going to get is $100 out of pocket. There are a lot of peer-reviewed studies, large studies that have been done with this that began years ago in the Netherlands and then worked its way across Europe and to the U.S. But Jack Schalken and the group that sort of put this together, and then we had one recently that I think is very important that I was involved with Yale Barents and the group in Nijmegen. Yale is probably one of the top guys in the world in MRI, and he was a little skeptical of this, but anyway, there were almost 500 men, 498, I think, that we looked at with SelectMDx sort of in the screening process in Europe, and there is a pathway that came out looking at elevated PSA, SelectMDx, and then deciding whether to do an MRI. That was impressive, and you know, where in the U.S. where MRIs aren't so available, it's a little bit different in Europe where they can get them for a couple $100. It was a good pathway. Both tests were better than either one alone, but SelectMDx was was turned out to be a very good test in the pathway. And I always tell people when I give talks is that PSA is one of the best markers out there. And it's inexpensive. We want to throw the net out. We want to let the little fish get out. We want to catch the big fish, and that's what the molecular markers do. And there's parallels in medicine. We always forget too is that when you see your family practice doctor and your blood sugar's elevated, they don't jump and hit you with metformin or with insulin. They do an A1C hemoglobin. Same thing with an abnormal EKG. You don't get a bypass, you get your vessels squirted first. So this is a pathway that things are on. PSA should not go away. I just listened to a talk from Mark Emberton at this weekend. There was a meeting called AdmeTech. They had some of the best talks and updates in prostate cancer. They did, we've been raising our cutoffs for PSAs, but they had a study with it using MRI looking for abnormalities with PSAs of less than 3, and then almost a quarter of the prostate cancers they found in their screening, and some of them were bad, were in that arena. So I feel good about our cutoff we use of 1.5 or 2, and Select MDX fits in very nicely there. We've done a lot of utilization of the test in those and lower PSAs. Next slide, please. So the enhancements are, again, everybody thinks the test is not changing, it's only enhanced. They're clear binary results, and now we have low risk and elevated risk. We don't have the very low risk. I'll go into that in a minute. And also the updated test description and disclaimer. Next one. Okay. So this is an example of the 2 new report forms you're going to get. I think you agree they're cleaner looking, more in quotes, modern end quotes, whatever you want to say. We'll do a side by side here in a minute, but what I like is you got the green light there with patient results, low risk. You've got the yellow light, the caution light with patient results, elevated risk. Next one. So we'll do a side-by-side comparison. Here's the old test on the left, as you can see here, with the colors of MDX, the purple and the orange, and the report, and using the term very low risk. That was modified to low risk, and some of this had to do with feedback that was given to the company from various sources, including MolDX and Medicare, after looking at stuff and how they wanted some things identified. And I think it actually turns out to be a lot more positive and informative. Next slide. So if we look at a blow up here, here's what you're looking at with the low risk. Still have there that low risk with the negative predictive value of 95 for 7, and also, thank you, and then for 99 for a Gleason score of 8. Again, that all the disclaimers about and then the trial that was done, and then down on the bottom there, if you can highlight that, some data that what is new, putting in some of the stuff that's been collected. It gets more personalized now with this particular test done on this patient, that it was a 8% risk for a Gleason 7, 22% having any cancer like a Gleason 6. So that's interesting. And we the only thing I've heard in way of feedback here is that when you're looking at the test, you want to sort of focus on that low risk and what that negative predictive value is, and maybe those things could be in bold, the negative predictive value of 95% and the 99% for Gleason 8, like low risk is in bold. Next slide, please. This is the older high risk slide, or elevated risk, whatever you want to call it. And we have the patient report here, just like the other one with the boxes. This is a little more streamlined, as you can see. And we're used to the speedometers or spotlights or whatever it is with the patient results with the percent likelihood of cancer on a biopsy, any cancer, and a likelihood of 7. What we have here is a yellow light, and the results are a lot clearer here. And then we'll talk a little bit about the personalized positive predictive values when we blow this up on the next slide. And so here's that patient elevated risk thing. This means that they have a 7 or above a risk of that. And it gives you, you can read it here, the 29% risk of 7 and a 27% risk of 6. The feedback that I've gotten so far has been that people are so used to looking at those two speedometers and the percentages that it sort of gets buried in the report here, and that this is the way it's come out, and the negotiations and that with you all, and this the input that the company got, and also with Moldex. And then there's the bottom line says, in the select MDX pivotal trial for patients with low risk disease, select MDX did it. And so that's sort of what's on the other one, so you can compare it. And they're looking at things like making this bold and things like that. But the change that probably bothered people more than anything was getting rid of the speedometers there. It's still there, right there, and I don't know what's happening with making that bolder, easier to see. Next slide. So let's look at a case. We got 2 cases that are going to be very similar with different results. A 66-year-old guy, PSA of 6. You see that out there right now in the real world, and unfortunately, people go and biopsy that person. Well, we know the most common cause for elevated PSA at that is size of the prostate. So maybe this guy has BPH, maybe an enlarged prostate, and you start sticking needles in them, and then you start finding low-grade cancers, and then that leads to overdiagnosis and overtreatment and patient concern and things like that. The stuff that got us into trouble with the U.S. Service Preventive Task Force. But so again, and just about almost, the A1C hemoglobin, here we go, elevated PSA. PSA is a great test. This probably BPH, we don't know. But so this is where the test comes in perfect. And you can see here that this patient is low risk. And if you look at his chance here, going down to the bottom, this is some new data, again, based on the patient. And that it's a 4% chance of a 7 and a 10% of a 6. That's pretty good. I mean, nothing's 100%. And I'm sure you tell patients the same thing. These are all data points that are helpful, and they're not pregnancy tests. They are ones that give you relative risk, and you put that into the whole equation here. The next one is another patient who is 65, and he has PSA of 4, and he is, again, another one with low risk. However, if you look in the bottom here, his risk of any cancer is Gleason 6 is 22% and 12% for a 7. And I think that's nice data to have. It personalizes a little bit more, and we don't want to find the 6s. Everybody's I listened to talks this weekend about active surveillance and how you follow patients, and wonderful. We don't want to find patients for active surveillance. We want to find patients that need to be treated, and this helps. So now, if this, some people say 12% chance, doc, I don't want to take a chance. I want to get an MRI, or I want to get a biopsy, or things like that. Most people say I go to Las Vegas any day of the week with with those kind of odds that above that you don't have anything. But again, this is the art of medicine, and where things like AI don't help all the time. Next slide is a higher risk patient, and he's 63, same PSA as the first guy, 6.3. So here's again where the test helps, and these are real patients; they're not made up. This guy has something going on. He's got a 14% chance of a 7 and 21% chance of a 6 cancer. Well, that's not real high, but you're going to get ones that are higher. And then the bottom again, it has in the SELECT pivotal study. That's right there. You got it. The low risk stuff. Again, this is where you start saying what you're going to do with the patient, but 14% probably most people will say, "Hey, well, this is good for a few years. We'll just watch the PSA and decide what to do." And I think next is a 61-year-old guy with again a lower PSA, sort of like the flip case of the other patient, the low risk patient. He's got a little bit higher risk, 32%. And again, depending on the health, 61, whatever, he's got a suspicious DRE. That's the other thing is that we talked about this from in this meeting this weekend about screening thousands of people in DREs. The answer is in mass screening, you don't need to do a DRE. Because you don't find that much, and I agree with that. But once somebody gets an elevated PSA, the ball game changes, and I think that's where people are getting confused. I don't do DREs anymore. Well, don't. You don't need to do a DRE when you do a PSA. But when somebody comes back with an elevated PSA, you're going to find something in these people. And I continue to do DREs on all of my patients with prostate cancer, and it's amazing what you can start something that is supposed to be T1C, PSA of 6, and MRI's got something in the left peripheral zone. You can many times you can feel these things, and unfortunately it's being pushed off as well. You don't do a DRE. Well, when somebody has an elevated PSA and you're evaluating for prostate cancer, that's a whole different thing. It's not, mass screening. Next slide. Is that it? Or we got another one? So both reports are going to be around for a while. The launch is coming up in a couple of days. It's exciting. And the changes that are occurring. Select MDX and I've been involved with a lot of markers over the years here with early detection is the one that's stood out as a very good one for me. I got involved way back when we had PCA3. PCA3 is great for detecting prostate cancer, but it's not great for discriminating what you want to biopsy and things like that. There are other tests out there. There's a lot more coming. And I think there's a ton of data that exists in studies with Select MDX, and that's why I'm pretty much sold on it.